This is my third video, and my third attempt at explaining what I was trying to say in the first two videos. And I think I sort of have the key, and I think I now see why, so I'm going to tell a short story that explains it. So in these few minutes I'll explain the major doctrines of Christianity in a complete way that you probably have never heard before. I never bring my own ideas into this, and these are the ideas of Immanuel Kant. I live in a society entirely based on Christianity, but everyone hates it, and no one knows anything about it. Hollywood programs the hate for Christianity by making almost every single villain in its blockbusters movies a Christian. Everyone knows that they call it programming for a reason, but you forget when you sit down and watch it. I have to credit Alan Watt of cutting through the matrix for that. I'm not interested in a YouTube channel or becoming a personality on YouTube. I've learned something and I want to share it because I want people to wake up from the hypnosis created by education and the media and the immature insanity of social pressure to conform to nonsense. There are many people who are excellent at creating YouTube content and giving great information. My favorites are E. Michael Jones and Rockin' Mr. E currently, and has been for a while. My favorite intellectuals are Immanuel Kant and Roger Scruton. David Duke is an example of character. Everyone hates him, both the corporate left and the corporate right, both wings of the same bird in this mad society, but he goes on. This is character, and the only time that character really even matters. And we're short of people with character. Alan Watt of Canada explains the intellectual history to understand our modern leaders, and you can find him at Cutting Through the Matrix online. Be sure to be listening to the guitar player and not the New Age philosopher. He just reads their policy papers and what they write and tells you about it. Really interesting stuff if you're new to sort of knowing the truth. I'm in agreement with all these guys on most things, but I think there is something that's really important that is not being said or explained by any of them, and that's why I'm doing these. It has to do with law and the foundations of the West. I started studying this whole New World Order gig a long time ago. Saw everyone else looking at it economically and historically, so I decided to learn about law. I wanted to write fiction when I started. I wrote it on novella, Dr. Schreckenstein, to illustrate a society based purely on statutory law and materialism. To explain the thing that makes Western society both exceptional and better than any other society is something I want to do with a short story. I want to show and prove what makes the West different, exceptional. I think I got the idea for the story from C.S. Lewis. So, imagine you're on a construction site. You're on the third floor and watching an argument between the carpenter and the plumber. The plumber had just went downstairs from the second floor to the ground floor to cut a pipe and bring it up to the third floor. He's walked 5 flights of stairs. He goes to stick his pipe in and finds it 2 inches too short from the wall. He looks over at the carpenter to explain that his counter is off by at least 2 inches. The carpenter picks up his measuring tape and checks the distance between the counter and the water heater. Says his distance is right on. So the process repeats itself all the way up and down the building with arguments growing. The arguments intensify. Numerous court cases are filed for time and money lost. Who's going to win and who's going to lose? Well, whoever's the most connected is probably going to win, and whoever's least connected is going to pay for it all. The judge has to sit with these people at the lodge and with his family and associates, and really doesn't have a yardstick to go on. In this particular scenario, there would be no other yardstick from which to write a judgment. There's nothing solid that the judge can go on to make a truly objective determination. The courts will be reliant on numerous judgments and statements made by tradespeople, all subjective in nature because the measurements they took were all taken from where the guys thought they should be taken. So what actually solves this problem? If the building had a cornerstone, the correctness or incorrectness of all the measurements could be taken. This cornerstone is the essential idea of Christianity, and Christianity brings this cornerstone into law, and that law forms the basis for the foundation of the West. Everyone's errors could be measured from the cornerstone, and all responsibility can be laid bare. The judge would be unburdened from making a subjective judgment. The cornerstone makes the judge's life easy and makes the tradesman's life fair. It makes the life of a thief or a criminal difficult, which is why some people don't like it. Christianity is under attack. Rulers do not want the people to have a yardstick from which their actions can be judged in a court of law. The term common law often means 2 things, both what has become tradition in the courts as well as that rational law that is uniform among all men. Love thy neighbor as thyself is the essential idea. What is customary is merely an approximation to this ideal in practice. We don't want to do all the math every time someone runs over someone else's cat, so we have custom, and that custom is an approximation to this unwritten law. Jesus Christ was a genius. His ideas far surpassed the Greeks, which could explain why Rome became the world's capital. Kant is the world's most respected philosopher because he explains Christianity as well as give the most clear and concise explanations of the true, the good, and the beautiful in the context of our limited knowledge. He was a Protestant and has a lot of present-day enemies who distort his ideas in their books so they can draw attention away from the master. Jurisprudence became a science in Rome, and it's the first thing that was ever called a science. The first science was Roman jurisprudence. For 1,000 years, all the smart people went to Rome to study law. The first usage of the word science, how it applies to the science of jurisprudence. It's essentially reason. Socrates essentially asks what this cornerstone could be in Plato's Republic and finds the golden rule. The Romans refined jurisprudence with the all-seeing god Jupiter, and this same essential idea of law is codified in the New Testament. It is a uniform idea that is really based on rational common sense. The New Testament goes a little deeper and provides rational guidelines for the preservation of the common law. The tree of knowledge, the water, the wine, original sin, Trinity, these are the main doctrines of Christianity, and I'll be explaining these, as I learned them from the great Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant. Christianity is the common law and forms the underlying structure of both governments and the courts of the West, whether people choose to admit that or not. Common law is Christianity, and it is completely rational. Nationalism was created by Fichte, a disciple of Kant. Religion is about what happens when you die for children. It is about ethics and morals that create good societies for adults. It's a search for truth where there is no other way to find truth. It's a way for reason to develop precepts of which it can't provide for itself. You have to say that, 1 and 1 is 2, and the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. To have math, you have to start with an idea. So too many people blame religion for being foolish because of what it says about what happens after you die. Professors of philosophy have no idea what Christianity even is, or at least that's what they sound like. They have no understanding of basic tenets of Christianity that apply to real life or any understanding of its place in Western society. No professor of the monkey religion has any idea about what Christianity even is. Christianity brings rationalism into religion and codifies and preserves this cornerstone of law, the common law. As we lose Christianity, we lose the consciousness and expectation of the common law in courts. In the story above, without a connection to a jurist cornerstone, the judge is burdened with making a subjective judgment, or reading and interpreting thousands of lines of code and then making a subjective judgment. With a cornerstone in place, the judge may find one side clearly in error, in which case, in fact, he has no choice. The judgment is independent of the judge, and this is the great innovation of Justinian code. He can tell his friends at the lodge that he had no choice. Oaths only matter when they require the oath taker to operate against the common law, against conscience, as a great scholar of laws, Samuel Pufendorf, explains. Other than that, they are completely benign. There are scholars of laws that quote the New Testament extensively, and ones who do not. Pufendorf does, and more modern ones tend not to, as Christianity is being forgotten. So it's like a boat that has maybe sailed too far away from the dock and can no longer see it. So there's a fundamental difference between a system of laws that has a cornerstone and one that does not. Christianity has the cornerstone, and no other system has this cornerstone that is universal. The very word law applies to that which is universal. By the word law, we mean universal. Judaism depends on its rabbis. Islam has its imams, and atheists have their scientists and politicians. Monkey religion has its faith and its politicians. These are all known as statutory religions. They exist for the will of their rulers and have no universal or guiding principle. The world runs on opinion and agenda. Jesus Christ is truth, not truth is Jesus Christ. In other statutory religions, truth is in its leader. The great innovation of Christianity is to find an actual truth, a universal law, where none was known previously, and truth sat on faith alone. Christianity is a revolution from Old Testament religions, not an evolution. Marxism makes no mention of laws, which is why it's a blind ideology. How can one make laws when reality is determined from only empirical conditions, and not an underlying principle of morality, which is both clear-cut and cannot be violated? With better laws comes better productivity, and that's how the West became powerful, not genetic superiority. The idea of genetic superiority explaining this is a result of an empirical determination of cause. The rational explanation of cause has the advantage in that it is universal and not discredited by history itself. Great societies were created by dark-skinned people in Africa in the distant past. Syria was the first with sewage control, not Rome. The Bible tells us not to be concerned with genealogies. Going back just 64 generations, each of us has to the power of 64 grandparents. That's a little over 1,000 years ago. I hope the ones in my branch decided not to keep it in the family, or to do so as little as possible. Now, I want to explain a few common law concepts that come straight from the New Testament. The New Testament's written in parables so that it transcends empirical reality, time and space, by not applying to any one particular place or time. God does not exist in space or time. Kant shows that space and time are perceptions of reality and not reality itself as we know it. I explain in my other movie, Dialectic, about the nature of truth itself and this stuff about reality, which, modern physics is saying the same thing. Okay, so these doctrines. First of all, separation of church and state is a Christian concept and a requirement for a Christian society. The United States was a Christian society and was therefore required to adopt the separation of church and state. Now, this I'm going to talk about, this is the concept of the water and the wine. The state is the water and the church is the wine. And I'll get to that in a second. Eating from the tree of knowledge. To eat from the tree of knowledge is to use the letter of the law rather than its spirit. The common law cornerstone cannot be precisely stated, but is always understood. Some expressions of it are the Greek's golden rule, the commandments of the Old Testament, and lessons of the New Testament, and in Kant's three successive categorical imperatives. Now, the idea can never be perfectly expressed because it is a spirit. To eat from the tree of knowledge would be to allow a statutory law to violate this common law, this unwritten law, or to be in a court of purely statutory laws. Okay, the next concept, the water and the wine. The water is the law of man. It is the law of commerce and governed by statutory law that evolved from the law merchant to the present-day Uniform Commercial Code. Charges are administered through the Uniform Commercial Code. These are commercial charges. The wine is the law of reason, which gets stronger with age as men develop better reasoning. And you can see some innovation with the statement of this cornerstone, the common law. I personally think Christ's is still the best, but Kant was no slouch. As the monkey religion overtakes Christianity, men begin to work from purely statutory laws. Lucifer is the god of materialism. Men and their statutory laws become the gods. Politically correct professors determine what reality is. Okay, the next one, original sin. All men are born sinners, it's a fact. We all violate the common law, we all live in a practical world. When you do commerce, how can you be sure that all the men that produced and bought you the goods were treated fairly? We are all sinners, but to varying degrees. We live in a complex world, and the free market determines value best, but it's still not very good at it. Making things perfectly fair is sometimes too complex. Sometimes we lie. Kant said this was absolutely wrong. But, as we know, it's sometimes also necessary. All men are born sinners in this way. Kant pointed in a direction, like us pointing our compass north. But no one intends to go visit Santa. Good people always try to take the high road. Trinity. Okay, so here it is, the big one. The Trinity is law, reason, and conscience. The Holy Ghost. God gives us law, Christ gives us reason, and conscience gives us the spirit of the common law. Conscience is our self-awareness and moral agency. Now, the courts have the law, the judge, and the prosecutor, reason as the defense attorney, and conscience as the jury. Statutory law draws us away from this ideal and gives us attorneys instead of lawyers, and juries that are not properly instructed or required to judge by the letter and not spirit of the law. So those are the major biblical concepts of the New Testament as given by Immanuel Kant in Religion Within the Bounds of Mere Reason. If you're interested in this, I would suggest the Oxford edition. They are a little less sanitized, I'm told, and that's what I have anyway. Now, before I go, I just want to talk about this whole concept of God for a second. People believe that mathematics works. Math is based on two ideas, counting and geometry. Geometry has a central idea of the shortest distance between 2 points as being a straight line. It is not possible to observe a perfectly straight line empirically. It is only possible by reason and imagination, and is impossible to actually see in practice, not even with a laser beam. Nothing can be perfect. Does this mean that math should be the next thing to be thrown into the trash bin after religion? The existence of God cannot be proven empirically, and the idea of a straight line being the shortest distance between 2 points cannot be proven rationally. The rational idea of consciousness and self-awareness shows that we are not merely machines, but something else that goes beyond empirical understandings. And this, I think, is the basis of religion, and it is essentially Kant's understanding. So that's actually explained in first part of the Critique of Pure Reason, which is not too difficult to read. It's not as difficult as Kant typically is. Anyway, I'm finished. Thank you for listening. It's my concern that it's the destruction of this beautiful common law itself that will result in the destruction of the West and pretty much humanity as we know it. Undermine the foundations of a society and it will fall. Thank you.